What old farmers fed their tomato plants, a homemade mix that works like magic. Here is what you will not expect from this video. The real trick was never about feeding the plant at all. Stay with me, because I am going to show you something that old agricultural records reveal about tomato nutrition that contradicts nearly everything sold in garden centers today. The reason matters more than the method, and by the time you understand why, you will garden completely differently. If you have been watching this channel, subscribe right now so you do not miss what comes next. And I would love to know in the comments, have you ever noticed your tomatoes perform differently even when you planted them the same way? Tell me your story. Your experience matters more than my voice alone. Hold on, this part needs your full attention for a moment. What I am about to share comes from a place most gardeners never look. The complete guide to old-fashioned tomato care. The patterns, the soil science, the seasonal timing that fed American farmsteads for generations. That is available in the full ebook in the description and pinned in the top comment. It covers far more than any single video can. But for right now, let me walk you through the counterintuitive piece that changes everything. Most people assume the healthier plant got better genetics or better luck. Wrong. Both came from the same seed packet. Both went into the same raised bed. Both received the same water and sunlight for their first month. The difference? One received something the other did not, and it cost nothing to make. Here is where conventional gardening advice fails. We have been taught that plants need nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK, the numbers on every bag of fertilizer. Feed those three elements and plants thrive. That logic seems sound. It is incomplete. What matters far more is what happens in the soil before the plant ever touches those nutrients. 60 years of agricultural research from land-grant universities discovered something that farmers in Lancaster County knew without any science to prove it. The soil is not dirt. It is a living ecosystem. In a single tablespoon of healthy soil, there are more living organisms than there are people on Earth. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all of them working. When those organisms thrive, they unlock nutrients that are already present in your soil. Nutrients the plant cannot access without them. This is the inversion that old farmers understood and modern gardening forgot. You do not feed the plant directly. You feed the life in the soil, and the soil becomes a bank account the plant draws from all season long. Most garden stores sell salt-based fertilizers because they work fast and show results in days. The plant shoots up green and tall, but that is a false result. What is actually happening is the plant is gorging on simple sugars and nitrogen the way a person might on processed food. It grows tall and pale and weak. When disease arrives, and it always does, the plant has no reserves. The stem breaks, the flowers drop. The fruit never sizes properly. Old farmers had no chemistry degree, they just knew what they saw. A tomato plant fed with kitchen scraps and yard waste stood thick and sturdy. The same plant fed with the commercial powder of the day grew tall and toppled over when the wind came hard. That observation, not theory, not marketing, just pattern and repetition, became the foundation of what I am going to teach you. Because the method my family used is not complicated. It is not expensive. And it works because it addresses the real problem, not the symptom. One more thing before we move forward. The reason this works goes deeper than I can cover in any video format. The enzyme processes, the microbial exchanges, the way calcium moves through the plant, only when certain bacteria are present. It is dense material. If you want to understand the mechanism so deeply that you never wonder if this is real, that guide in the description and the pinned comment walks through the entire system. It is there for the people who want to know not just what to do, but why it matters. For now, understand this. The secret is not a secret at all. It is an old, ordinary principle that every family farmer relied on. And once you see it work in your own garden, everything changes. Let me read you something from my grandfather's planting journal, written in 1947. He says here, the tonic makes the difference between a plant that merely survives and one that thrives. But only if you understand when to give it and how often. That sentence sat in my mind for years before I truly grasped what he meant. The timing is everything. Most people make this tonic and then they panic about schedules. But farmers did not consult calendars. They observed. A tomato plant in its first 2 weeks of life does not need this tonic at all. It needs nothing but decent soil and water. The roots are still shallow. They are still learning the ground. Pour the tonic too early and you waste it, because the plant cannot yet use what the soil offers. Wait, this part is crucial, and I need you to focus for a moment. The tonic should first touch your tomato when it has its second or third true leaf. Not the seed leaves, which come first and look nothing like tomato leaves. The true leaves arrive next. When you see those, that is when the roots have gone deep enough to benefit. That timing marker is the difference between results and disappointment. In my grandfather's time, families kept detailed records of their gardens. Not for show, for memory, because the patterns were what mattered. A plant fed too early became weak and soft. Fed at the right moment, it grew sturdy. Waited too long and you had lost the early strength-building window. The frequency is just as important as the timing. Once your tomato reaches that second true leaf stage, you give it the tonic every 10 days to 2 weeks. Not every 3 days, not every day. That is the mistake people make when they think they are feeding the plant itself. They overfeed, they drown the soil life, the microbes cannot keep up with the feast, they reproduce too fast, exhaust themselves, and collapse. Your plant ends up starving again, but now with dead soil underneath it. Every 10 to 14 days. That rhythm matches the pace at which the soil life actually needs feeding and the pace at which your plant can actually use the nutrients being unlocked. It is not arbitrary, it is observational. Farmers watched their plants and adjusted. A cool, wet spring meant spacing the tonic further apart. A hot, dry summer meant moving closer to 10 days. Your conditions are different from your neighbors. You watch your plant and adjust the same way. Now, before we continue deeper, I want to mention something. The complete mechanics of how this rhythm works, the respiration rates of the microbes at different soil temperatures, the nitrogen cycling patterns, the way plants signal nutrient demand through leaf color, all of that lives in much greater detail in the guide available through the description and pinned comment. That guide covers the signals you watch for, the adjustments you make, the troubleshooting for when something goes sideways. It is there if you want the full foundation under your feet. For this video, the core principle is simple. Observe your plant, not a calendar. Watch for the true leaves. Wait until then. Feed every 10 to 14 days after. That is the rhythm old farmers kept. That is the rhythm that works. One more piece my grandfather recorded. A farmer who feeds by the calendar feeds blind. A farmer who feeds by the plant sees the whole picture. He meant something specific by that. The plant tells you when it is ready. The plant tells you when it is ready. Not every seedling grows at the same pace. Two started on the same day in the same house can be weeks apart. One might have caught more light. Another might have sat in a cooler corner. The soil in one pot might hold water differently than the other. None of that matters once you know what to look for. Those first leaves that come up, the cotyledons. Smooth, simple, almost featureless. Not real leaves at all. They are just seed leaves. The real work starts when the true leaves arrive. You recognize them because they look like actual tomato leaves, serrated edges, the shape you see on a full-size plant. That is when the root system has spread enough to handle food. That is when the soil life can work. Before that, feeding does nothing but waste your mix. My grandfather's notebook from 1952 has a whole section on timing. He wrote dates next to sketches. Cotyledons appeared on March 14th. First true leaf visible March 24th. Fed the tonic on March 28th. Started the second feeding on April 10th. The spacing was deliberate. He was not feeding random. He was feeding rhythm. This is where it gets practical. You make your tonic once, but you use it across 2 or 3 weeks, not all at once. The first feeding goes down when you see those true leaves emerge. Just one light application. 1 cup of the tonic per seedling, poured at the base, not on the leaves. The soil drinks it. The microbes wake up. The plant does not get shocked, it gets awakened. 10 to 14 days later, you feed again. That gap matters. The soil life needs time to multiply and establish. If you feed too soon, you are just adding more food to a system that is not ready to process it. The nutrients sit there, they leach away. Worse, they can burn the roots if the concentration gets too high. The old farmers knew this. They did not rush. Wait, I need to pause on something important here. Everything I have shared in this video, the full methodology, the troubleshooting steps, the variations for different seasons and different soil types, the exact measurements for scaling up if you have many seedlings, all of that lives in the guide. The complete guide that you can access through the description or the pinned comment below. It walks you through every stage with the precision my family has refined over 4 generations. If you want the full framework, not just this video, that is where the real depth is. It is a paid resource, and it is worth having if you are serious about this. For now, the principle holds. Feed by plant stage, not by calendar. Feed every 10 to 14 days after the true leaves show. 3 applications across the season usually does it. Some gardeners do 4. It depends on your seedlings and your climate and how aggressive you want the growth to be. But here is what separates a mediocre result from a strong one. The application itself matters as much as the timing. You do not splash the tonic around carelessly. You pour it slowly and deliberately at the soil line. The goal is to wet the soil thoroughly without creating a puddle. The microbes need moisture to work, but not swamp. Swamp kills them just as surely as drought does. A careful hand knows this. My neighbor who laughed at the magic elixir watched me feed his plants once. I poured slowly, I let the soil absorb, I moved to the next plant only when the first one had drunk its fill. He said it looked like watering, not feeding. I told him that is exactly what it is. You are watering life into the soil, and that life does the feeding. The difference between a weak tomato plant and a strong one by midsummer comes down to these small choices. True leaf timing, application frequency, careful, deliberate pouring. None of it is complicated. All of it requires attention. That attention is what the old farmers gave freely because they had no other choice. They could not buy solutions. They had to observe and respond. When you first make that batch, the color surprises you. It is not clear like water or dark like coffee. It sits somewhere in between. A pale tan, almost the color of weak tea. And that color tells you something important. It tells you the yeast is alive. It tells you the molasses has dissolved. It tells you nothing has curdled or separated. If your mixture looks right, it is ready to work. The timing of your first application matters more than people realize. You do not start feeding the soil on the day you plant the seedling. That seedling came from a nursery. Its roots have been packed in a compressed soil mix for weeks, sometimes months. It is stressed. Flooding it with microbial activity too soon can overwhelm a tender root system. Wait until the seedling has made at least 2 true leaves. You see the difference once you know it. The first leaves that unfold from the seed are smooth and simple. The true leaves that follow them have the shape, the texture, the veining that belongs to a tomato plant. Once you count 2 true leaves, the root system has begun to establish itself. Now it can handle what you are giving it. Your first application should be small. 1 cup per plant is plenty. You are not trying to drench the soil. You are introducing the microbes gradually, giving them a chance to establish a foothold. Pour it slowly at the base. Let it soak in. Move on. 2 days later, you repeat it. Then 2 days after that, so you are giving the tonic every other day for the first 2 weeks. This establishes a population of microbes that can handle what comes next. After that, now listen carefully because this part makes the difference between a garden that thrives and one that just gets by. You stop the every other day schedule. You shift to once a week. 1 cup per plant once a week from true leaf stage until the plant is 3 feet tall. After the plant reaches 3 feet, you can stretch it to once every 10 days. The plant has built its own support system by then. Its roots have developed enough network that the microbes are already well established. You are no longer building the colony, you are maintaining it. Now, before we continue any further, I need to be direct about something. This method works. You will see the difference. But understanding why it works, the actual mechanics of what is happening in the soil, how the microbes unlock nutrients, why certain combinations of ingredients trigger a specific response in the microbial community, that is where things get deep. Most home gardeners never bother with those details. They just follow the recipe and move on. But my complete guide on soil feeding and microbial gardening goes into all of it. The science, the variations, the mistakes people make that they never even notice. It is in the description, and it is pinned in the comments section. It is not free, it is a resource I built because too many gardeners waste years making small errors before they learn what actually works. That guide cuts through that. The real test comes in July. By then, you have been feeding the soil consistently for 4 or 5 weeks. The plant has set its first flowers. The weather is warming. The soil is alive in a way it was not when you started. A plant that received no tonic will be flowering, yes, but the stems will be thinner, the leaves will be paler, the flowers will be smaller. The plant that received the tonic, the one your neighbor laughed at, will be thicker in the stem, darker in the leaf, and already showing the first small green tomatoes swelling behind the flower. The difference is not subtle, it is visible from across the yard. Some people see that and think it is luck. Some think one plant got more sun or less wind, but you will know the truth. You fed the soil fed the plant. Everything else flows from that one simple choice. Now, there is something else that happens when you keep feeding the soil this way through the middle of summer. The microbes multiply. They settle in. They establish themselves so deeply that the soil around your tomato becomes less like dirt and more like a living system, a community. And that community does things a single feeding cannot do. It breaks down what is already there, old roots, leaves, organic matter that has been sitting in the ground for months. It converts minerals that the plant cannot reach on its own. It holds water better. It resists disease. It even changes the flavor of the fruit you harvest. I have seen families make this one change, switch from powder fertilizer to soil feeding through this tonic, and watch their tomato yields double in a single season. Not because they are smarter gardeners, not because they suddenly have perfect conditions, but because they stopped fighting the soil and started working with it. They stopped trying to force the plant and started building the ground. A visitor came to our garden last summer and asked me why we do not use any of those bags from the big box stores. I told her straight, because they are made to sell quick results, and quick results make weak plants. A tomato fed that way will grow fast, yes, it will be green and tall. But when the heat comes in August, when the disease pressure builds, when the fruit needs to ripen and hold its flavor through the fall, that plant fails. The one we built with soil feeding keeps producing. It stays healthy. It gives you actual tomatoes worth eating, not just green things pretending to be ripe. Here is the timing that matters most. You want to apply this tonic every 10 to 14 days from the time you plant until mid-August. Not every 5 days. That overwhelms the system. Not every 3 weeks. That leaves gaps where the microbes slow down. Every 10 to 14 days keeps the population steady and building. Around mid-August, stop. The plant has enough. Feeding it then just delays ripening and pushes energy into green growth when you want it in fruit. 1 cup per plant is all you need. Pour it at the base, not on the leaves. Let it soak down. The microbes do their work below ground, and they do not need to be on the foliage. In fact, if the liquid sits on leaves in direct sun, it can burn them. Some folks think more is better. It is not. 1 cup, every 10 to 14 days. Consistency matters far more than volume. Listen, I need to pause here because this next part separates the gardeners who get real results from the ones who go through the motions. The reason this works, the actual mechanism of how microbes feed a tomato, that is explained in depth in my complete guide. It is in the description and pinned in the comments. The guide walks you through soil biology, the chemistry of what each ingredient does, how to adjust this recipe for different seasons and different soil types, and the signs to watch for that tell you if your soil is truly alive and active. That guide is where I put the keys that unlock this whole method. If you want to understand not just how to do this, but why it works, the guide is where that lives. It is a paid resource, and I wrote it for gardeners who do not want to guess, for people who want to know. The second part of this that surprises people is what happens to the foliage. By early August, if you have been consistent with the tonic, the leaves of your tomato plants will be noticeably darker than they were in June. Not artificially dark, not something that looks painted on, but a deep, natural green that shows the plant is processing nutrients at a level it simply could not reach before. That dark foliage is a signal. It tells you the microbes are working. It tells you the soil beneath the plant is alive and feeding. Some folks interpret that and think they should feed more, that the plant is hungry for something. It is the opposite. That color is satiation. That is the plant saying it has what it needs and is building reserves for fruit production. More feeding at that point is actually harmful. It wastes your tonic. It can cause the plant to put energy into stem and leaf instead of fruit. The plants know what they need if the soil is alive and responsive. Your job is not to override that or push it further. Your job is to keep the soil functioning so it can communicate with the plant and give it exactly what the plant is asking for in each moment of the season. This is where most home gardeners stop understanding the plant and start guessing. They see that dark green and think abundance means they should keep pushing. They make a second batch of the tonic. They pour it on again. They convince themselves that if a little feeding makes the plant darker, then a lot of feeding will make it unstoppable. It does not work that way. Once that deep green arrives, once you see it on the lower leaves and working its way upward, you have crossed a threshold. The plant is no longer hungry. It is satisfied. It has moved on to the next chapter, which is fruit. And fruit cannot happen if you keep forcing nitrogen and energy into leaves and stems. The plant has limited resources. Every ounce of sugar it makes, every trace mineral it pulls from the soil through those living microbes, all of it gets divided. Some goes to growth, some goes to defense, some goes to reproduction. That fruit is reproduction. It is the plant's entire reason for existing. A plant drowning in nitrogen will make enormous leaves, beautiful, glossy, perfect foliage, but it will flower late. It will set fruit reluctantly, and what fruit it does make will be slow to ripen and weak in flavor. Your grandfather knew this. My grandfather knew this. It is in every old farming manual that survived the 20th century. The language changes, but the observation is always the same. Feed the soil in spring, then get out of the plant's way. So here is what you do from the moment that dark green appears. You stop the tonic. You do not pour another batch. You do not add compost or manure or anything else that will accelerate growth. What you do instead is water consistently. Deep watering, not frequent sprinkles. You want the soil to stay evenly moist, not soggy, not dry. That moisture matters because the plant is about to move all of its attention to making seeds and protecting the fruit that holds those seeds. It cannot do that if it is stressed by drought or drowning in standing water. And you watch for disease. This is where your attention shifts. When a plant is focused on growth, it is relatively protected against fungal and bacterial problems because it is putting energy into defense compounds. But once it shifts to fruit production, that defense gets less attention. The plant is vulnerable in a new way. You are not fighting disease with chemicals. You are watching for it daily. You walk the rows or around the pots. You look at the undersides of leaves. You check for spots or discoloration or anything that looks like it does not belong. If you catch it early, if you spot a leaf with a dark patch or a stem that looks compromised, you remove it by hand. One leaf, one branch if necessary. Gone, destroyed. That stops the problem before it spreads. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning. Not the tonic itself, not the recipe. The tonic works, yes. It is powerful. 1 gallon fed at the right time changes what a plant can become. But the real revelation, the thing that separates people who grow tomatoes from people who understand tomatoes, is knowing when to stop. Knowing that feeding and building are not the same as caring. Knowing that a plant does not want to be pushed. It wants to be supported. It wants the soil alive beneath it, and then it wants to be left to do its own work. You fed the soil in the beginning. You woke up the microbes, they multiplied. They created a living root zone. The plant grew strong and dark because that soil was responsive. Now, in this second chapter, you are done feeding, you are watering, you are watching, you are removing what does not belong. You are trusting that a plant with good soil under it does not need you to make it fruitful. It needs you to not interfere. Take this one small action this week. Look at your tomato plants right now. If they have that deep green foliage, measure it, see where it starts on the stem. That is your signal. That is the line where you shift from feeding to watching. Do not feed again. Water deep. Walk the rows. Look underneath. That is all. The plant will do the rest. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, subscribe so you never miss a new upload, and leave a comment telling me whether your plants are already showing that dark green or if you are still waiting for it. Hit the notification bell, and I will see you in the next one.